Hey everybody. So now we're starting the lesson on Intro to Non-Narrative Time, and this is in opposition to what we've been studying so far, which is continuous or narrative time. And this, what we study when we study non-narrative time, is montage. Montage is a really creative space to be in. And we call narrative, if we call narrative continuous time, space, and information, montage refers to nonlinear sequences with jumps in logical time, motion, space, and information. At the end of this lesson, this is going to be 2 lectures and then 2 short lectures, and then you will do a quiz. So do keep track of the information I give you. You also may need to look up the spelling of films or directors as we're going along. So, montage, and what we'll go over is first we'll go over some examples of time, space, and information. And then we'll get into some interesting ways of using a match cut and a graphic match cut, what they are, and some examples. And along the way, we'll look at definitions and examples of a parallel narrative, what a non sequitur narrative is, and associative links or associative editing, where Scott McCloud calls it aspect to aspect or wandering. So, montage, definition of time. Montage often suggests the passage of time. It's really a tool to suggest the passage of time, or it's often a tool. It's a technique in film editing in which a series of short shots are edited into a sequence that collapses time. But it may also do the same thing to information, collapsing a lot of information that we don't need to fill in. So if the first half of the semester we're looking at the door opens and the hand goes on the doorknob, and then a pullback shot creates the door opening, and then we have a cross shot where somebody's coming through the door. Montage is about skipping gaps in time that we know we can fill that in. And it's often about skipping even large gaps of time. Like the next sequence I'm going to show you actually skips about a decade of time through a montage. So this is Orson Welles' Citizen Kane from 1941. And in it, we're watching the rise of a star who's getting a lot of publicity, who's shocking a lot of people. And we don't need to see and hear all the performances and all the narrative in it. We can infer that this is what happened over a 10 or so year period. You'll also notice that there's a lot of layering going on. Every image here is a composite of 2 or 3 images, so you have multiple pieces of information, and you have soft dissolves, which also accentuate the idea of time passing. Montage can also suggest space. So this gets a little interesting, where you can, instead of dissolving, layering the information, you can put sequences one right after the other and create a kind of parallel narrative and go back and forth between 2 different places. So this technique will condense space through editing. And here is an example of Dud Atkins' film Sleepwalker from 2007. And notice how it's got such rapid editing that it's almost a stop motion, but it's an action that's happening in parallel in multiple places. And he's creating kind of almost a narrative sequence. They're happening so rapidly, and they're composed so similarly. And I think that composition and framing from all of these images is something for us to really pay attention to, because we can use the idea of moving from composition to composition in multiple sequences. So let's have a look at this stunning example. that is Sleepwalker by Doug Akin, 2007, the trailer. Really beautiful image. And you see how in Sleepwalker there were the shot, all the shots were composed to be in rapid similarity from the previous one, except for the light switch, right? And you go from this micro image of a light switch to a macro image of lights in a building. The patterning is similar, is the same. The scale is completely different, but we make an associative link between the light switch and the lights turning on or off. Okay, so before I jump to associative links and get ahead of myself, to finish up on this idea of space, which Scott McCloud calls scene to scene, where you can have multiple shots, very simple shots between multiple places, person with fruit in different cities. And we make the link that there's a pattern of information going on. And where it gets really interesting, like I said earlier, is when using geography. And you can actually create really diverse narratives going on in the viewer's mind at the same time. And another aspect of montage, often used in the beginning, it can be used often as an establishing montage, is aspect to aspect or wandering, similar to an eyeline match, but not necessarily. Doesn't have to be an eyeline match, but the eye or the viewer, your audience's eye is wandering around these different things. And it might be establishing a scene. It might be establishing multiple things that are about to unfold in the film, and we don't know what they are yet. And it's kind of an engaging way of seeing the multiplicity of things that are going to be answered, with that kind of anticipation of closure, but in the long run of the film. And in aspect to aspect, you have two things: wandering, like I just described, and associative. Very important word that's used in non-narrative editing is these associations that the mind makes, because it's really playing off of the psyche of your viewer and this human capacity for wanting to put meaning together when seeing diverse images. And you can kind of play with that. So aspect to aspect wandering, we see different images, we make links. And here is an example of, this is often, like I said, used as an intro. So this is going to be a theme for an old television show, using this idea of aspect to aspect. And you get a glimpse of what is going to unfold in the whole series, over a whole season. You have these fast edited shots. But pay attention to how the rule of thirds is being used. There's no logical narrative that they're handing us, but they're giving us visual movement. You'll see zooming in and then zooming out, and then every image will have an action, and then all of a sudden there'll be a still stark image as a kind of pause, and then you'll move around the rule of thirds again. So let's have a listen for Mission Impossible. Okay, some other compositional things that were going on in that is the graphics, right? So you have this horizontal line, this burning line that sort of holds all this diversity together, and there are moments of fire where the composition kind of comes together. But also you get that dynamic diagonal to really, once the pattern becomes predictable and there's not much more that they can do with that rhythm, you have that dynamic diagonal coming in of the typography. Notice how the typography matches the content of the typewriter, when police take records, and the type negative space of the O becomes the cropping form where we see the different characters. And then I think it goes to a V as well. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to stop, take a pause there, and then I'm going to talk about some non sequitur examples and before we move into match cut.